Ippo's fights post-anime are literally insane, ranging from brutal beatdowns to strategic mind games and raw displays of strength. This was the era when Ippo was still active before his retirement, and it's one we dearly miss. It's interesting to watch his development from a dominant champion to slowly becoming sluggier and taking more damage, all the way to his final match. Since the anime covered every single fight and most of you have already seen those, this video showcases the remaining time Ippo had left as an active boxer. He has been inactive for over 300 chapters, but his manga-only boxing career started off with his title defense against Kalasava. Ippo was called by Yagi and Kamogawa and was informed that he had 1 month to prepare for his title defense against the 7th ranked boxer Takuzo Kalasava, the previous year's Rookie King champion. Every high-ranked boxer refused to fight Ippo because of his destructive display of power. Ippo wanted to focus on the basics, so he decided to train from scratch for this fight with Kalasava and accepted the challenge. Meanwhile, Takamura informed Kamogawa that he was going on a trip around Japan while waiting for his next fight. This is something Takamura does after each of his world title fights. He goes on a trip for half an arc and returns just in time for the next fight, coinciding with Ippo's and Karasawa's match. At the same time, Sanada, the former Japanese bantamweight champion and the medical student Ippo fought during his first title defense, returned to his old gym to congratulate Karasawa on his upcoming national title fight with Ippo. Karasawa mentioned that he has an anti-Dempsey role strategy, but the odds are 7-3 that he will lose, so he asked Sanada to help him with his training since Sanada has already experienced Ippo's fists firsthand. In preparation for the fight, Ippo does something similar to Kamogawa's Iron Fist training, where instead of punching logs in the hills, Ippo hammers logs into the hills to train his side muscles. He also trains with Kamogawa using the basic routine we have seen so many times before. Takamura on his trip gets lost, something very relatable as I often get lost myself when wandering around, which results in funny Instagram stories, so it's a win-win situation. Takamura helps a random guy in the countryside pull his car out of an accident, and this countryside happens to be Gerumichi's hometown, Ippo's very first kohai. They don't meet, and this is the last time we see Gerumichi in the story, so for the 3 Gerumichi fans watching this video, this is your moment to embrace him. We also see what Karasawa is up to. He's training his abs to prepare against Ippo's body blows that drain the life out of his opponents. Kamogawa and Ippo analyze Karasawa and conclude that he has very fast hands and is an outboxer, so they plan to target body shots to erase his footwork and make him immobile. Ippo was forbidden by the government to punch logs into the hill, so he had to rely on other training options. He also admits to Itadaki that he has used the Dempsey role for too long and won't be using it for the time being. We get a random cut to Nekoto where he's robbed by a thief and is chasing after him. The plot twist is that the thief is Takamura, who is just on his way to find a hot spring where a lot of college babes are supposedly waiting for a dreamy tall strong man to appear, only for the dreamy babes to turn out to be monkeys. Takamura picks up a fight with a horde of monkeys and escapes the madness. He then finds himself in Nagoya, where Sawamura randomly spots him on the streets. Then he is in Osaka, where he buys a jar of pickled squid from Senno's granny that will give anyone definite diarrhea. Takamura then calls Ippo from Fukuoka, and just as the squids hit him, he has to take a deep dump in the bushes. Later he enjoys ramen in Okinawa, where Shimabukuro catches him. Basically, Takamura makes a whole Japan tour during this little trip, and nobody at the gym believes him. On the day of the weigh-ins, Ippo and Karasawa check each other's bodies. Ippo expected Karasawa to train his lower body, while Sanada observed that Ippo's back muscles had grown, mistakenly thinking that it was for the Dempsey role. Sanada confirms that he will be at Karasawa's corner and has his back to defeat Ippo in the match. Meanwhile, Ippo feels a sense of uncertainty, as if something is missing, even though he trained to perfection for the match. Just in time, Takamura returns from a trip and gives Ippo some encouraging words to motivate him. Ippo takes these words to heart and promises Takamura that he will demolish Karasawa. Takamura also offers the squid he took from Senno to Ippo, which thankfully Ippo refuses because something really bad happens later. However, the other Kamogawa boys eat the squid, which later leads to Aoki's downfall. On the day of the fight, the Kamogawa boys are late because they took a deep dump due to the squids, and to make matters even worse, Takamura fingers Aoki to death for loss, causing him to run back to the toilets. When the match begins, Karasawa tries to take the lead, which turns out to be a fatal mistake, as Ippo charges right back at him, confusing Karasawa even further. The psychological pressure causes Karasawa to land fast jabs that have little impact on Ippo. Karasawa tries to outbox as long as he can, but before he knows it, he's cornered and trapped. Ippo capitalizes on this and lands a devastating body shot on Karasawa, who starts panicking. This is not what he prepared for, as he realizes that he underestimated Ippo. With nowhere to escape, Karasawa Kalasava clinches Ippo to avoid damage, but this turns out to be a grave mistake, as Ippo can easily punch through a clinch into his opponent's stomach. Sanada sees this coming and orders Kalasava to let go, but Ippo jabs him instead. Kalasava has no choice but to block Ippo's heavy punches. Desperate, he throws himself into Ippo, causing both to collapse to the ground, ending the round. By the end of the round, Kalasava is sweating bullets, while Ippo's camp remains cool-headed as always. Kalasava now has to shift his strategy and push Ippo into the ropes. He tries to intimidate Ippo by using his footwork and throwing jabs to lure him in, but the psychological pressure is too great and Kalasava finds himself cornered again. Ippo weaves in and it looks like he's going to use the Dempsey roll. Kalasava prepares to counter, but to his surprise, Ippo goes lower and aims for a body shot. Kalasava grits his teeth, but he's not prepared for Ippo's monstrous strength. On the verge of giving out, Kalasava tries to counter Ippo with his last bit of spirit, but Ippo sees it coming and counters with a devastating blow of his own that scares the crowd. Kalasava dramatically tries to hold onto the ropes, but his spirit can no longer support his broken down body, and he falls to the mat, ending the match within just 2 rounds, with Ippo taking nearly no damage. After that fight, Ippo was supposed to face Miyata for the OPBF title, but the fight got postponed. Instead, Ippo had to defend his title against Taka. Ippo's fight against Taka might be the most savage and brutal match to date. Ippo was punching the living soul out of an old veteran who refused to go down, and in the end, Ippo almost ended the man's life in the process. It all began when Ippo wanted to relinquish the Japanese title to have his long-awaited OPBF title fight against Miyata. Kamogawa accepted Ippo's request and set up the fight. Later in the story, when Kamogawa announced to Ippo that his fight with Miyata was set, he had to defend the Japanese title one last time to avoid ring rust, since their match was scheduled to happen in 6 months. Kamogawa noted that the OPBF fight would be the last fight before heading for the world, so Ippo accepted the challenge and eagerly awaited his next opponent. The next day, Ippo picked up Itadaki from the hospital with a car, and while arriving at the gym, almost ran over Aoki. It's also revealed that Itadaki will not fight in the All-Rookie King final since he is too injured to compete. Initially frustrated, Itadaki accepted the fact that he couldn't participate. Ippo also gives Itadaki the baton to inherit the Japanese title in the near future when he relinquishes it. Ippo's last challenger is set, and it's an old man, a 31-year-old veteran Taka. To gather more information about him, Ippo seeks the help of Date, who has become a coach at his own gym. Date mentions that Taka was scheduled to face him back when he first won the Japanese title, when Taka was ranked first. Date admits that he was quite nervous about facing Taka, but Taka withdrew before their match began. We learned that the reason Taka pulled out was because his son was born and he officially retired from the sport. However, his son became a target of bullying due to a gossip that his father was too afraid and fragile to keep competing. So Taka wanted to prove to his son that he still had the fire in him to become a great boxer. His record is 22 wins, 11 losses and 1 draw, as he is too rusty and took him longer to challenge for the title again. Despite this, he has never been KO'd in his career and will stand tall no matter what. Ippo admits that instead of focusing what's in front of him, he was too fixated on Miyata and realizes he shouldn't lose sight of his current challenge. In preparation for this fight, he trained his hooks and stamina to outlast the veteran. By the way, he is 31 years old but looks like the oldest looking dude in the entire manga. On the day of the weigh-ins, Taka did his best 2020 cosplay and looked as fragile as he could be. Kamogawa then revealed to Ippo that it was all an act to gain sympathy for the fight. Basically a trick, and it certainly wouldn't be the last one that Taka had up on his sleeve. On the day of the fight, Taka brought his son with him to witness him become a champion, which, while not outright stated, was another ploy to garner more sympathy from Ippo, who no longer has his father beside him. As soon as the match began, before they even touched gloves, Taka said "F that" and immediately started throwing punches. Ippo was caught off guard but quickly got into his rhythm and turned it into a slugfest. Just as Ippo was about to follow up with a hook, Taka went down unexpectedly, making Ippo think the fight might already be over. However, it turned out that Taka was faking the injury. He quickly charged at Ippo and clung to him, wrapping his arms around him in a clinch. He repeated this about 3 times until Ippo was forced to use his elbows to break free. At this point, Taka claimed to know Ippo's weakness, which confused Ippo. If you still haven't guessed, these were all psychological tricks to mess with Ippo's mind and throw him off his game. Ippo charged at Taka again, but for some reason he couldn't reach him before the bell rang. In the next round, Ippo tried to punch him again, only to find his fist still couldn't connect. It then dawned on Ippo that Taka had switched his stance to a southpaw stance. Ippo hadn't trained to fight against a southpaw and was initially overwhelmed. He decided to block himself while charging right into Taka, who responded by charging at Ippo as well, putting one shoulder on him. Ippo tried to land liver blows, but Taka deflected them and did something no other boxer had done in the series. From the short distance, he started to throw uppercuts at Ippo repeatedly, leaving Ippo unable to land a hit. By the end of the round, Kamogawa shouted at Ippo to pay close attention to what Taka was doing. Ippo took these words to heart and was somewhat able to hit Taka through his guard. However, Taka got lower and positioned himself again to hit Ippo with more uppercuts. Ippo saw through it, dodged, and countered with a light hook, which Taka anticipated. Taka responded with another uppercut, followed by a flurry of uppercuts again and again. Ippo managed to throw some punches of his own, but they seemed to have little to no impact on Taka. In the next round, instead of charging in recklessly, Ippo started to march forward methodically, slowly breaking down Taka's defense. But Taka again got low into position and took heavy punches that seemed to have no effect, while Ippo received the most damage. Taka even managed to cut Ippo's eye, which signaled that things were getting really serious. If Taka wanted to, he could exploit this opening and potentially win via referee stoppage. Kamogawa wanted Ippo to hit him, so he did, and Kamogawa revealed that to defeat Taka, Ippo should do everything Taka does but better. If Taka hits hard, Ippo should hit harder. If Taka goes low, Ippo should go lower. So when Taka went into position again, Ippo pushed him back, went lower himself, and finally saw an opening to send an uppercut of his own. Now Ippo was the one going low and landing uppercuts on Taka. Taka abandoned this and opened up his arms, inviting Ippo to slug it out. Even though Taka managed to land some decent hits, engaging in a slugfest with Ippo is the worst way to speedrun your life. Things got so bad for Taka that Ippo even made his son cry, worried that his dad might not survive the fight. By the end of the round, Ippo thought Taka might be unconscious as the man simply refused to go down. We then see that Ippo is right. Taka is in a dreamlike state, envisioning his son being disappointed in him. Even the way he stands up from his chair is almost inhuman. Determined to end this before inflicting long-lasting injuries to Taka, Ippo throws a devastating punch that sends him flying. But to Ippo's surprise, Taka stands back up like a zombie. Ippo unleashed the Dempsey roll and nearly ended the poor man's life with it. However, just before Ippo could land the devastating blow, Taka got into his rotation position again and landed a powerful uppercut. At this point, Ippo had enough and delivered the most savage ending combo of the entire series. First, he dodged the uppercut and sent his own counter uppercut to Taka, lifting him a full meter off the ground. With Taka's son crying out for his father's life, Ippo delivered a career-ending hook, turning out the lights for good and ending the match. Although Taka didn't die, it took him a few minutes to get back up from the fight. Afterwards, Taka's son asked his father to teach him how to box, which concluded Taka's character arc. Kamogawa then informed the press that with this match, Ippo would relinquish the Japanese belt and issue a challenge to Miyata for the OPBF title. Back home, Ippo reflected on Taka and even remembered his own dad, learning a lesson he will not forget, to fight for something greater than himself. Following the Taka fight, Miyata was next, but their matchup got cancelled because Miyata had to fight another boxer that was too important. He ended up cutting ties with Ippo. With nothing else left in Japan, Ippo aimed higher, the world stage, starting with his first international opponent, the Thai featherweight champion Jimmy Sisva. The Kamogawa boys returned from their training camp and were surprised to learn that Ippo would be having another match soon. At this point, Itadaki was forbidden from sparring with Ippo, as Ippo would be facing powerhouses in the near future, and the concern was for Itadaki to avoid sustaining damage from sparring with him. It was revealed that Jimmy Sisva is the same guy Miyata fought and developed the Jolt counter against, as seen in both in the anime and the manga. Ever since the match, Jimmy has become somewhat unhinged, having fought a total of 45 times with only 7 losses. He averaged almost 9 fights per year, and it shows. When his plane landed in Japan, the scars on his face were visible, hence his nickname Scratch J. The moment he arrived, he was baffled by the Japanese people and remembered his fight with Miyata, and was yapping about the Fist of God. At the weigh-ins, Jimmy's presence intimidated Ippo so much that he hid behind Kamogawa. When it was revealed that this fight was crucial for advancing on the world stage, Jimmy asked if Miyata would be watching. It was confirmed that there was a high possibility as Miyata saw Ippo as his rival. This answer invigorated Jimmy and he swore to KO Ippo with the hands of God. Later we learned that during this match with Miyata, Jimmy claimed to have seen God, who awarded him with the hands of God to become a great boxer. It's heavily hinted that Jimmy is suffering from brain damage, as his obsession with this God and his struggle to put words together are apparent, so I can't help but to feel bad for him. On the day of the fight, Kamogawa's strategy was to stop Jimmy from getting too close to Ippo by not allowing him to charge. Ippo was ready to comply, but when the match began, Jimmy took a few steps back and charged at Ippo with full speed dash. This single punch drove Ippo into the corner, and Jimmy charged again right into the corner and gave Kamogawa a jump scare. Ippo realized that he was fighting against a wild boar and needed to adjust. However, all he could do was block while Jimmy kept delivering powerful punches and dashing back to repeat the pattern. Ippo had to adapt quickly and decided to charge in faster to land quicker blows. He started landing liver shots and solid hits to put Jimmy at a disadvantage, but Jimmy twisted his body and used all his weight to deflect Ippo's fists. He was mimicking Miyata's jolt counter but with his own spin, calling it the Tornado Jolter. He used the move against and actually hit Ippo, making Ippo do a full backflip and crash into the mat. The ref, however, called it a slip as Ippo and Jimmy's fists crossed, essentially causing Jimmy to lift Ippo. Somehow this freaking ref sees an impossible to see a high caliber slip, but can't see obvious fouls even the crowd is able to catch, like the mod match that was Mashiba vs Sawamura. In the second round, Ippo charged at Jimmy again, landing solid blows. Jimmy went for another Thunder Jolt, which Ippo dodged, but it was just a setup for a follow-up jolter from the other arm. Ippo took that hit head on, barely surviving it, but reassured Kamogawa that he was fine. Ippo had to come up with something, so he decided to attack Jimmy when he was wide open, right when Jimmy was throwing a punch. Both exchanged blows with Ippo on the verge of giving up, while Jimmy was dashing right into Ippo's corner. But just in time, Ippo collapsed right into his chair as the bell rang. That was very nice too. Kamogawa wanted Ippo to continue just to pressure and throw hands like wild cavemen. Meanwhile, Takamura scissors Aoki's eyes. The round began and both charged at each other. Jimmy first jolted Ippo's fist away, but Ippo also put all his weight into his leg, and both punched each other's fists, sending shockwaves through the arena. Ippo continued his strategy, and Jimmy realized that Ippo was also throwing jolts now. But not only that, Ippo threw multiple jolts, building momentum from the previous jolt. Jimmy was now getting overwhelmed, and both had a close infight where Ippo threw heavy punches until the round ended. Kamogawa saw Ippo's potential to do something unique with the jolts, so he ordered Ippo to combine the jolt into an uppercut to finish Jimmy off, which Ippo accepted. Jimmy was not about to give up either, as he wanted to take his god all the way to the world stage. So when the round began, both were again in a close infighting contest. Jimmy threw the jolts like crazy while Ippo dodged and used his dodging momentum to throw a jolt uppercut, which didn't connect and both men's heads collided. Now they were both covered in blood and Ippo couldn't see, so Jimmy took this opportunity and threw a jolt which almost sent Ippo down, until Ippo literally saw the god in the lights. Ippo came back to his senses and we get to see the coolest ending sequence to a fight and our first tease of the diagonal Dempsey roll that Ippo would use in the near future. Ippo threw another jolt and used the momentum to transition into the Dempsey roll, as he would later do in the story. Jimmy tried to counter with one last jolt, but Ippo dodged it, used the Dempsey roll momentum to perform a jolt counter uppercut, and from the lights saw the god, who was Kamogawa with the mitts, ready to hit the target with a devastating uppercut, which tore Ippo's leg muscles and sent Jimmy flying down to the mat for good. It only took one punch from this proto-diagonal Dempsey roll to finish off an opponent who otherwise didn't budge to any of Ippo's attacks. This is the very first time we see this evolved state of the Dempsey roll that Ippo will develop in the future, where he uses his momentum to throw uppercuts and transition back into the Dempsey roll. It is a nice teaser. Jimmy then got back up and saw Ippo for the last time. When he woke up, he noted that he had seen the devil himself and no longer wanted to box, saying he was going to retire. He also said it was God who gave Ippo his last bit of strength to finish him off. This was also the fight where Ippo got his nickname, Fujin, meaning the god of wind. Characters like Kamogawa and Takamura realized Ippo's newest potential with the free roam Dempsey roll and how destructive it could be to finish off his opponents like Miyata. But unfortunately, we won't see any improvement on the Dempsey roll for another 300 chapters. On his way back home, Ippo also accepted that he might never fight Miyata and needed to go his own path to greatness. After Thailand, the Philippines was next, with none other than the infamous Malcolm freaking Ghetto. Ippo has one fight where he faces a notorious scammer and a potential gang leader, who happens to be the Philippine featherweight champion Malcolm Ghetto. Ghetto uses cheating tricks to win his fights and even fixes most of his matches for money. Ippo couldn't stand the idea of anyone, not even people associated with the gang, disrespecting boxing like that. Towards the end of the fight, he gave Ghetto a mandatory beating that he wouldn't forget. At the gym, the boys learn that Kamogawa has been arrested. Ippo and Yagi go to get him released and discover that Kamogawa went to visit a coach body office to get information about Ippo's next opponent, since one of the coach's boxers had recently fought him. However, Kamogawa got enraged for some reason and started beating the coach up. They learned that the fight was fixed, meaning they paid the opponent hush money to take a loss. The opponent is none other than the Filipino featherweight champion, the magician Malcolm Ghetto. The Japanese boxer that Malcolm had a fixed loss against approached the Kamogawa gym, wanting to prove that he wasn't a fraud. He was ranked 7th in the nation, but Ippo knocked him down with a single punch. The guy was too proud to accept a fake victory over a world-ranked boxer, but deep down he knew it was all staged. He wanted Ippo to redeem them by defeating Malcolm. Ippo analyzed Malcolm's matches and something seemed off about him. Somehow, despite being almost the same size as Ippo, he could throw punches from a far distance. There was some conflict over whether Ippo should face Ghetto, but both Ippo and Kamogawa were determined to fight him. Back at the gym, Takamura was beating up Aoki with Kamogawa's cane until he accidentally hit Kamogawa with it. Ghetto's camp wanted to negotiate with Ippo's team about the fight, but they only cared about the money and didn't even know who Ippo was or what his achievements were. This enraged Kamogawa and he decided that Ippo needed special training to make Ghetto pay. Ippo was invited to Mashiba's gym to spar with him in preparation for Ghetto's unusual long-range punches, since Mashiba naturally has a long reach. Initially, both Ippo and Mashiba didn't want to fight each other, since Ippo is scared of Mashiba while Mashiba hates his guts. But since Mashiba needed a suitable sparring partner for his OPBF title fight after his suspension ends, Ippo was the perfect choice. So, the rematch of the decade finally happens. Mashiba unleashes the flicker jabs, now with an improved reach. Ippo weaves in, gets within Mashiba's range and delivers a liver blow. Mashiba retaliates, leading Ippo into a trap and landing a devastating uppercut. Ippo, now determined, unleashes the Dempsey roll right there. Mashiba tries to keep Ippo at a distance, but Ippo closes the gap and lands the Dempsey roll on Mashiba's body. As Mashiba lowers his guard, Ippo lands a headshot, but Mashiba counters with another uppercut. Both fighters are beaten up but ready to keep going until the scene cuts to Mashiba angrily taking a shower, frustrated by the injuries Ippo inflicted on him, while Ippo admits defeat. The next day, Malcolm Ghetto personally visits the Kamogawa gym to negotiate the prize money. He manages to get under Kamogawa's skin, leading Kamogawa to bet 1 million yen and then 2 million yen in a winner-takes-all match, which would be around $35,000 in today's money. Ippo and Ghetto finally come face to face, but Ghetto doesn't even recognize who Ippo is and calls him a boy before leaving the building. The disrespect towards the Kamogawa gym was mounting, and it was starting to frustrate everyone. At the weigh-ins, Ippo was in a good shape, while Ghetto didn't make the cut and demanded Kamogawa to pay more if he wanted Ghetto to make the weight. So Ghetto took off his clothes and was ready to fight. While Ghetto was undressed, we see that the guy has gunshot wounds, meaning he really is into some dirty business. On top of the 2 million yen, Kamogawa also bet 500,000 yen of his own money to raise the stakes. When Ippo went to check out the ring, he saw Ghetto, and there Ippo said how much of a piece of work Ghetto really is. Ghetto revealed that he had a business of pickpocketing and as a result got shot multiple times but survived. In the ring he feels safe, scamming other boxers, sabotaging matches and betting with money. Ippo was visibly furious, and on top of all the money, he also bet 500,000 yen. This meant if Ghetto won, he would get 3 million yen, which is about $52,000. Ippo then realized that he didn't have 500,000 yen on the hand and asked the boys to bring him money. Itadaki gave 50,000, Aokimura gave a total of 300,000, while Mr. World Champion gave 30 yen. Both Aoki and Kimura revealed that they stole it from their registers, which put even more pressure on Ippo. If he lost, he wouldn't be able to pay his friends back. In the ring, Ghetto gave Ippo one last chance to fix the match, letting Ippo win while Ghetto would take more money, which made Ippo even more furious. When the match began, Ippo charged right at him and started to throw hands, managing to down Ghetto in the first few seconds of the match. Of course, Ghetto got back up from the knockdown. Ippo charged at Ghetto again, but Ghetto extended his arms. Ippo responded with another punch, but Ghetto suddenly vanished and was chilling in the corner. Ippo tried to charge back at him, but Ghetto used the same trick, and this time Ippo actually slipped. Ippo refocused and was now able to see through Ghetto, but he still couldn't land a punch. Ippo stuck with the same strategy until Coach Kamogawa gave the order to look at Ghetto's feet. Now Ippo could follow Ghetto and deliver a body blow right as the round ended. In the second round, Ippo focused on Ghetto's feet again, but Ghetto extended his arms and stopped Ippo from dashing into him. Throughout the round, Ippo tried to step in, but Ghetto kept him at bay until the end, feeling satisfied with himself. Kamogawa suggested to Ippo to aim a duel exchange to at least hurt Ghetto. So in the third round, Ippo charged like a wild boar and almost hit Ghetto's stupid face. Ippo landed some light hits while also tanking Ghetto's jabs. Ippo eventually got into Ghetto's reach and wanted to throw hands, but Ghetto pulled an uppercut out of nowhere that shocked the whole crowd. Even Coach Kamogawa looked concerned about what Ippo should do next. This pattern continued for several rounds. Each time Ippo tried to get close, Ghetto just jabbed him away, preventing preventing Ippo from closing the distance. This went until the 6th round, where Ippo had taken so much damage he was getting sluggish. The Kamogawa boys were now getting concerned that Ippo might lose the bout, so Aoki analyzed the heck out of Ghetto and actually figured out Ghetto's magic trick. Itadaki came down and gave a weird riddle about the trick, and Kamogawa had to explain it to Ippo. When the round ended, Ippo fell into the chair. Kamogawa told Ippo to keep using the same strategy, but now he needed to watch his own neck and hit harder. Kamogawa failed to explain Ghetto's trick clearly, which was just Ghetto loosening his gloves so he could extend his reach. This didn't make much sense since Ippo had fought long-range opponents in the past and just had a spar with Mashiba, but anyway, Ippo tried to get closer again and succeeded by imagining Kamogawa holding his neck, which happened to get close enough to Ghetto. Ippo then needed to immobilize Ghetto, so he unconsciously threw a heartbreak shot that Date used, stopping Ghetto from moving. He followed it up with the most devastating punch of the fight, where Ippo almost pulverized Ghetto's stupid face. Ippo was now moving in and Ghetto felt intimidated. Ippo charged in and delivered 2 powerful body blows, but Ghetto jabbed him, and that was enough to send Ippo into an almost unconscious state. After piling up all the damage, Ippo could barely move. He survived the round but accidentally sat on Ghetto's corner. Kamogawa tried to revive Ippo by placing ice cold hands on his face, which actually worked, and Ippo was ready to give his best in the next round. However, Ghetto transitioned from jabs to straights and started landing heavy punches on Ippo. It was getting so bad that Kamogawa ordered Yagi to throw in the towel, but just as Yagi was about to do it, Ippo suddenly dodged. Kamogawa grabbed the towel and Ippo, now getting used to Ghetto style, threw another body blow. Ippo wasn't letting Ghetto get away and unleashed a flurry of punches, landing a devastating liver blow that sent Ghetto to the mat. Ghetto got back up, comparing the situation to being crucified, with Ippo firing cannon shots at him. Ghetto tried his best to keep Ippo away, but Ippo just blasted his fists anyway. Ghetto, in his infinite stupidity, thought it would be a good idea to challenge Ippo to an all-out brawl, and of course, he got hammered. Ippo was practically punching dead meat at this point, as Ghetto slowly and questionably slid down to Ippo, his broken down body collapsing flat to the mat, ending the match. Ippo's face was swollen, so when they went to see the doctor, they ran into Ghetto. Kamogawa gave Ghetto the reward money he would have normally received if it had been a standard non-betting fight. Ghetto accepted it and revealed that he would continue scamming other boxers in the future. He also warned Ippo and Kamogawa about the real monster, the OPBF interim champion Randy Boy Jr. The next champion on the list was the Indonesian featherweight champion, who was practically unknown. The only information they had on him was that he only fought 3 matches and a video depicting an Indonesian island where Ippo's opponent briefly appeared. Then we get introduced to Wally, a boy who grew up with monkeys and adapted their way of living, possessing the mobility, agility and the instincts of a monkey. His trainer is also the same trainer who trained Hawk and was the soldier that raised Kamogawa's fist after his victory against Anderson, indicating his importance in the story. Before coming to Japan, they made a detour to New York for a spar against Volk, who was world ranked first in the junior lightweight division. During that spar, Wally gave Volk a real challenge, so much so that Volk and his coach needed to call Coach Kamogawa and Ippo to let them know that Wally is no joke, and under no circumstances should he be allowed near the corner, as this is where he has the most freedom. On the day of the weigh-ins, it appeared that Wally was having the time of his life getting to meet Ippo, as according to him, Ippo will show him the greatness of boxing and how much fun it could be. It is evident that Wally does not take the sport that seriously and views it as a means to have fun. That is why on the day of the fight, in the first round of the match, Ippo already scored a knockdown on him. But Wally's coach understood that Ippo would give him a hard time in this fight, so he yelled out freedom, prompting Wally to make a complete 180 in his boxing stance and start dodging Ippo's punches like he's in the Matrix. At first glance, Wally's boxing style was almost reminiscent of Hawk's style, with his dodges and punches coming from seemingly impossible angles. However, he then began to incorporate moves like the smash and flicker jabs into his arsenal, showcasing that he not only emulates Hawk but also adds real boxing techniques to his arsenal. Then Ippo's and Kamogawa's strategy was to corner Wally, even though both of them had been warned not to do so by Volk and Daniki. Nonetheless, they proceeded and almost succeeded in cornering Wally. However, something really weird happened. Wally used the ropes to levitate and pulled himself back quickly, surprising Ippo by repeatedly repeatedly punching him. He did this too many times during the fight, making it feel unnatural and unrealistic. Wally jumped high, used the ropes as his advantage, and could even drift punch Ippo unconscious. Wally repeated these maneuvers throughout multiple chapters, seemingly pulling these moves out of thin air, and Ippo could do nothing to counter them. Eventually, by chance, Ippo managed to corner Wally and thought it was his chance to finally inflict some damage on him. However, he should have listened to Walk's advice and ended up being knocked unconscious by Wally's unorthodox boxing style. It was only after Ippo was knocked out cold that he suddenly remembered Walk's words about not cornering Wally. Ippo's and Kamogawa's strategy then shifted to targeting Wally's midsection to slow him down and create openings for counterattacks. However, Wally saw through the strategy and continued dominating Ippo without Ippo laying a hand on him. It became so effortless for Wally to land punches on Ippo that he was getting bored and engaged in a slugfest with him. In a moment of desperation, Ippo managed to land a slight blow on Wally, further enraging him. Although it seemed futile to inflict any damage at all, their next goal was to do whatever it took to make even the smallest impact on Wally's lower body. Wally anticipated their strategy and increased his speed, and on the process denies all laws of physics as he relentlessly pummeled Ippo. The situation grew increasingly dire for Ippo, who was on the verge of losing consciousness but continued enduring the punishment in a desperate attempt to win against Wally. It was getting so bad that Kamogawa almost threw in the towel, only to hesitate when he saw Ippo's determination to win. In the next round, Ippo realized he couldn't endure any more punishment and decided to unleash all his strength in the hopes of landing a lucky punch on Wally. Fortunately, the accumulated taps Ippo had delivered to Wally throughout the round started to take their toll, hindering Wally's footwork. This allowed Ippo to catch up to him and land some solid punches. As Wally struggled to maintain his composure against Ippo's overwhelming strength, he began to panic. However, when it came to exchanging blows, nobody could match Ippo's power, leaving Wally overwhelmed and ultimately saved by the bell. It became evident that Ippo had indeed made an impact on Wally's body, as his footwork was now completely compromised. In the final round, they continued to exchange blows until Wally found himself cornered and saw the opportunity to counter Ippo once again. Determined to finish the match, Ippo unleashed the Dempsey roll. Despite Wally's attempts to evade it, Ippo increased his speed to the maximum, preventing Wally from escaping, and delivered a powerful punch to immobilize him. In a last-ditch effort, Wally tried to counter Ippo, but failed and was knocked unconscious. Recognizing the severity of the situation, Wally's coach threw in the towel to prevent him from sustaining permanent damage, a decision Coach Kamogawa had hesitated to make. Ultimately, it was Ippo who collapsed at the end of the fight, while Wally walked away with his head held high, smiling at an unconscious Ippo. Once Wally was out of the way, Ippo had no remaining challengers on the national level. Even internationally, no one dared to challenge him for the Japanese title. However, this time he received a challenge from the ranked lightweight boxer who fully believed that he could defeat Ippo for the Japanese championship. Hisato Kojima, a heavy puncher type that could easily knock out his opponents in one punch. Still, he had a severe drawback in his boxing style that was holding him back, and that was his speed. During a sparring session against Miyata noted that he couldn't possibly win against Ippo since he wasn't qualified enough to defeat a world-ranked monster like Ippo. Kojima laughed at Miyata for his foolish comments and claimed that he knew Ippo's biggest weakness, a secret known only to him. He asserted that he was the only one capable of exploiting this weakness to defeat Ippo. Later on, when Ippo and the Kamogawa boys attended a random boxing match, they randomly ran into Kojima, who was cheering for one of his kohais. Ippo introduced himself and wished him good luck for their upcoming fight. However, for absolutely no reason, Kojima started talking trash about Ippo's previous opponents, such as Sando and Sawamura, two of Ippo's most formidable opponents. He claimed that they were nothing but jobbers, weak enough for Ippo to beat. According to Kojima, they lacked the brain and tactics to exploit Ippo's weakness, reiterating that he was the only one capable of defeating him using that weakness. While Kojima wouldn't stop talking about Ippo's weakness, Ippo gave him a cold look, angered by Kojima's disrespect towards his previous opponents, who had also trained hard for boxing. Ippo left with a bitter expression, clearly irritated by Kojima's stupid comments. The next day, in the boxing magazines, Ippo reads a comment about Kojima where he once again claims to know Ippo's weakness. He continues to trash talk not only Sando and Sawamura but all of Ippo's opponents, stating that they lost because they were weak and unaware of the weakness. Ippo rightfully becomes even more enraged, commenting that this guy talks a lot and deserves a good beating. And Ippo's right in this. Why is Kojima so obsessed with Ippo's weakness and constantly trash talking his previous opponents? We then learn that Kojima is in fact a big fan of Ippo. He watches his tapes regularly, almost every day and over time noticed that Ippo's boxing, though impressive and world-ranking material, has a weakness that nobody else noticed. Since Kojima himself felt the need to accomplish something in his boxing career and face his biggest boxing idol, he took it upon himself to challenge Ippo for the featherweight title by moving from lightweight to featherweight. Kojima is a hard hitter but, in contrast, very slow. So, what is this weakness that he believes only he can utilize to defeat Ippo? When asked the same question to Miyata, he stated that Ippo, despite being world ranked and an excellent boxer, has a weakness that could be his downfall. In each and every fight Ippo is involved in, he charges directly into his opponents without good footwork or strategy, like a truck driving towards a person. If utilized correctly, you can counter this with the right strategy, but countering and directly charging Ippo without a strategy would be suicide. That is what Kojima is aiming for. Since he possesses a powerful right hook, he believes that with Ippo charging right into him, he can counter him with a punch he claims to be equal to a 2-ton collision. But why does he continuously trash talk Ippo's previous opponents? On the day of the weigh-ins, we see Ippo in his best form due to his training in preparation for this title fight. Then we see Kojima almost right up to the bones since he had to drop 2 weight classes. When asked about their upcoming fight, Ippo initially did not want to give a comment about it. However, Kojima, as always, began to talk shit about Ippo's previous opponents again. When he saw that it was not working as it used to, he began to talk trash about Coach Kamogawa instead, saying that whoever trained Ippo is doing a horrendous job and is the reason for Ippo's weakness. Ippo could no longer hold back and was visibly pissed. He warned Kojima about what is about to come in a fight tomorrow. On the day of the fight, Ippo initially seemed calm and relaxed, even though he was visibly annoyed every time he heard Kojima's trash talk. However, when it was time for him to go out and defend his title, he turned cold again, stating that he wouldn't take long for him to finish the fight. On the other side, we see that Kojima felt guilty deep down for always harassing Ippo with his stupid comments. He wanted Ippo to take him seriously during their build-up by angering him and training intensely, so Ippo would be in his best shape. And it worked. Ippo took it upon himself and trained for this match unlike all of his other matches. What Kojima did not expect was for Ippo to take it personally and enter that match full of rage, wanting to unleash all of his anger on Kojima. Takamura noticed that Ippo was looking to brawl with Kojima and abandon his usual boxing style, so he told Itagaki that he should want Ippo to cool off and treat his fight like a boxing match. Instead of delivering this message to Ippo, Itagaki kept it for himself, wanting to see Ippo go all out in a fight for once. He always wondered what the serious Ippo would look like in the ring. So, when the bell rang, both fighters were ready to beat each other up. But for a solid 1 minute and 3 real chapters, they both stood there looking at each other. If Kojima's plan of Ippo charging right at him did not come to fruition, he would have been screwed. Then he noticed that Ippo was charging up his muscles, preparing to deliver powerful punches when he moved in. Ippo started to weave in but abandoned his peekaboo style and charged right into Kojima to knock him out. Everything went according to Kojima's plan, and Ippo took a direct 2-ton heavy collision from Kojima. At this point, everyone thought that it was over for Ippo. However, in Ippo's inner world, he saw his previous opponents that Kojima disrespected fading away. Along with them, Coach Kamogawa, whom Kojima talked mad trash about, also faded away. Ippo came back to his senses without going down and was ready to unleash a devastating blow on Kojima. Instead of dodging, moving away or defending himself, Kojima stupidly accepted his fate and was ready to tank the upcoming punch. What that dumbass was not expecting was that the single punch unleashed Ippo's inner monster, sending Kojima flying across the ring. It was a one-punch first round KO for Ippo, and he was quickly taken backstage for the upcoming world title fight, where he was left alone and lost consciousness from the counter Kojima gave him. After his final Japanese title defense, Ippo was finally set to take on the world stage in a preliminary world title match to determine who would face Ricardo Martinez next. His opponent is the second-ranked world featherweight Alfredo Gonzalez. Before that fight, Volk had a world title fight and match both Ippo and Sano watched, and Volk became the first world champion of Ippo's generation. Ippo and Sano, pumped from witnessing that intense fight, were in an adrenaline rush and wanted to cool it off with a spa. The Kamogawa boys arrived at the gym and found Ippo barely conscious, hanging onto the ropes in the ring after the intense spa. Meanwhile, on his way back, Sano ran into Takamura and proudly announced that he had finally managed to kick Ippo's ass in a spa. Strangely, Takamura asked if Sano noticed that Ippo seemed weaker. Sano shrugged it off, claiming he had simply gotten stronger, and was eagerly awaiting Ippo's challenge to dethrone Ricardo Martinez. Martinez. Back at the gym, Kamugawa informed Ippo that his match with Alfredo Gonzalez had been confirmed, prompting Ippo to relinquish the Japanese title. With that, it became Itadaki's responsibility to reclaim the title, and both of them would be competing at the same event. The next day, Ippo went to deliver some fish to Kumi, who invited him to stay for dinner. They flirted a bit, with Ippo sipping hard, and they almost smooshed again, until Mashiba came home and started interrogating Ippo about what they were doing. Mashiba also asked why Ippo's face was all messed up. Ippo explained he fought Sano and shared his intentions in boxing, saying that even though he's all banged up, he still wants to be able to walk home on his two own feet. Mashiba, unimpressed, called out Ippo's lackluster mindset towards challenging the world, stating that he too thought Ippo had gotten weaker. It was also revealed that Itadaki will face Imai again for the title, whom he previously defeated and has now become as bit smug. After almost 700 chapters, we finally see Ricardo Martinez again, who is on a phone call with Gonzalez. In their conversation, it's revealed that Gonzalez has only lost twice in his boxing career, both times to Ricardo, and he wants another rematch after he defeats Ippo. Martinez initially doesn't remember who Ippo is until his coach reminds him that he is the Japanese champion who uses the peekaboo technique. Ricardo's face then lights up as he tells his coach he wishes he would mention that earlier so he could warn Gonzalez about Ippo's strength. We learn that Gonzalez grew up in the streets and admired Ricardo's matches, especially since Ricardo would give free tickets to kids to watch. During Ricardo's fight against Date, he delivered a speech that inspired Alfredo to become a boxer, emphasizing the importance of machismo. AG Date reviewed Gonzalez's fights and noted that Gonzalez is nearly a copy of Ricardo Martinez, though he also senses a deep, aggressive side that Alfredo tries to hide. Ippo goes through one last final training montage before his fight with Gonzalez. All that is left is the battle itself. Alfredo lands in Japan and has been sparring with other featherweights. Imai in particular caught his attention, but thankfully that spar didn't happen. It would have been a brutal massacre for Imai. At the weigh-ins, Ippo and Alfredo finally come face to face. When asked how they felt about their upcoming match, Ippo gave a generic answer, while Alfredo answered from Ricardo's point of view, stating that he didn't expect much of Ippo. In the hall, Ippo wished Itadaki the best of luck before Itadaki entered the ring, where he was introduced with his nickname Kronos, the god of time. Imai also entered the ring, and the fight was set to begin. When the bell rang, Imai charged at Itadaki, who entered the Matrix to slow things down and tried to push Imai back. But Imai landed a gut punch and followed with a left hook, sending Itadaki down. Imai had prepared extensively for this rematch ever since his loss against Itadaki, studying every one of Itadaki's fights and memorizing his movements. He knew about Itadaki's ability to slow down time ever since the first fight where Itadaki unleashed the potential. And now, Imai took it upon himself to finally unseal the potential he unleashed from Itadaki. Both fighters exchanged blows and Imai managed to disrupt Itadaki's footwork. Imai threw another punch, and as Itadaki attempted to counter, it was clear his punch was now going too slow. Imai landed a decisive blow, knocking Itadaki out cold, and the match ended with Imai becoming the new featherweight champion. A devastated Itadaki congratulated Imai and then backstage broke down in frustration over losing and not fulfilling the promise he made with Ippo. And that's pretty much the last time Itadaki holds any real relevance in the story. He will be barely important to the story ever again from now on. Ippo witnessed the whole fight and was now the event's last hope to make an impact for the Kamugawa gym. Ippo and Kamugawa had one final conversation to beat Gonzalez and then challenge Ricardo Martinez, while Gonzalez saw Ippo as just a stepping stone to fight Ricardo himself. Gonzalez even has the nickname Meltzli, meaning the Mexican Reaper. Both of them stood in the ring and the fight began. Ippo tried to move in, but predictably first had to get used to Gonzalez's long jabs, which he specifically trained for since in Hajime no Ippo lore, Mexicans have these genetically coded jabs. Ippo got used to Alfredo's style and got into his reach, but failed to make a punch connect as Gonzalez deflected every blow, though he was still cautious about Ippo's monstrous strength. Alfredo got serious and sped up his jabs, landing some damage on Ippo. However, it took more than jabs to take Ippo down. Ippo ate the incoming jabs and pushed through them to deliver a liver blow, which Alfredo also managed to block. The second round began and both men continued with the same strategy. However, Miyata noted that Alfredo hadn't used his right fist even once and seemed to be waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike Ippo. Ippo managed to get in, where Alfredo baited him and finally used his right, landing it on Ippo, who absorbed it with his forehead. Ippo fell for the same pattern again and received another blow to the forehead, but this time he moved forward and delivered a successful liver blow of his own. Now it was an all-out infight with Gonzalez aiming for Ippo's head, while Ippo targeted Gonzalez's midsection until the end of the round. The third round began and both men increased their speed. Ippo used
the same strategy to eat the jabs to get close to Gonzalez, but Gonzalez pulled a devastating left hook that sent Ippo crashing to the mat. This is the first time since Ippo's fight with Sanada that he went down. Ippo barely got back up to continue the fight and the round ended. The fight skips right into the middle of the 5th round where we see Ippo all banged up, while Gonzalez has barely taken any damage. The atmosphere in the arena changed. All Ippo can do is take punches while holding himself from going down, but he still isn't able to land anything. Kamogawa even had a flashback of Wally and Miguel for some reason. At the end of the round, Ippo was given permission to use the Dempsey roll and unleashed it. Alfredo just stared at Ippo and finally snapped. He felt insulted by Ippo's lack of boxing IQ and now wanted to completely destroy Ippo with the Dempsey roll, showing his true colors. Alfredo slowly approached at Dempseying Ippo, looking to counter him head on as Ippo unleashed the Dempsey roll. It was a dangerous strategy and whoever got hit was going down, making for a scary sight with almost duel exchanges. Right on time, Ippo used the Dempsey counter, stopping his punch to let Alfredo throw his, then planned to land a clean hit. But Alfredo simply pushed forward and clinched with Ippo, stopping the Dempsey counter. They both got into an infight again. Now Gonzalez abandoned his cool-headed style and just went all out on Ippo. Ippo noticed Gonzalez's guard was loose and went for a body blow that transitioned into an uppercut, which Gonzalez barely managed to block at the last second. However, he still felt the impact. They exchanged punches and prepared to continue their infight, but Gonzalez unexpectedly went down. This gave Ippo the motivation that Kamogawa's teachings could work at the world level, while Kamogawa himself had another flashback of Wally and his coach. Gonzalez got back up and Ippo tried to finish him off while he was still weak, but the bell rang, ending the round. Gonzalez aimed to finish off Ippo in the 7th round, landing heavy punches on him. Ippo absorbed the damage and refused to go down. It was now or never, so Ippo threw everything he had to land a decisive blow on Gonzalez. Both men were now literally beating the life out of each other, but Alfredo had the upper hand in the infight. Ippo landed another deadly uppercut, sending Alfredo unconscious to the ropes. Ippo looked back at Kamogawa one last time, signaling that he would end the fight now. Kamogawa then finally understood why he remembered Wally and his coach. They warned him that Ippo was on a path to disaster if he didn't change his style, and Kamogawa realized this too late. Ippo charged in to finish Alfredo once and for all. Alfredo wasn't going to let his chance to fight Ricardo slip away and risked everything to exchange this final blow with Ippo. It was a matter of who connected first, and unfortunately Ippo got tapped first, punched into oblivion and fell face first into the mat. Before the ref could even begin to count, Kamogawa rushed to Ippo, urging him to get back up, but Ippo didn't respond. At the same time, Takamura had an inner monologue wanting Kamogawa not to worry about Ippo as long as Takamura was still here. Ippo got up but fell onto Alfredo's shoulder and Alfredo pushed him away. Ippo lost for a second time in his career, failing to conquer the world stage. When the arena was empty, Date consoled Takamura, saying everything would be okay and the sun will shine again. Takamura, however, wasn't convinced and shadowboxed his frustrations away in the empty arena.
The very next day, Umezawa catches Kimura and Aoki just cuddling together and wonders where Ippo is. They realize he's out for his road work even though he's still injured, and might run into Takamura, who will bully him to death for his loss. As Ippo reflects on his defeat, he concludes that his boxing style isn't cut out for the world stage. He hates this feeling of losing and promises to improve on what he was lacking to make a big comeback. Just then, Takamura appears, but contrary to what the Kamogawa boys expected, he doesn't mind Ippo's loss at all. He just acts like nothing happened. He even cracks a very Takamura-like joke that I unfortunately can't show on YouTube, but you can read for yourself. Kumi shows up to console Ippo and said that Mashiba misled her to believe that Ippo won, where he said that this fight had Ippo's best KO. When Kumi and Ippo finally get some time alone, she gets straight to the point. Why doesn't he just quit boxing? Ippo insists that he can't quit now, not while so many people are counting on him to improve and make an impact. But Kumi challenges his way of thinking, asking why he has to break his body just because people have expectations of him. Ippo has no real answer but promises her that if he loses again, he will retire for good. Later, Ippo meets up with Umezawa to take his mind off the loss, but Umezawa notices something concerning. Ippo can't even draw a straight line. Realizing just how badly Ippo needs to rest, he urges him to go home. We then see just how worried Umezawa is about Ippo's well-being. Time passes, Ippo heals up and he returns to the gym, where Kamogawa is waiting to confront Ippo about his loss. Ippo just says he didn't give his best and promises that next time he won't disappoint Kamogawa. However, Ippo's story takes a backseat for a moment as the Kamogawa gym has some big news. It was revealed that Takamura would have another world title fight. But this time, instead of moving up another weight class, it would be a title unification bout for the middleweight championship. On the undercard, Sando and Mashiba would have their fights, as all the other Kamogawa boys had lost recently, which amused Takamura to the point that he became a complete goddamn degenerate. If that wasn't enough, he even went up to Aoki, gave him some cake, then hit him with a twerk until Aoki completely lost it. The next day, Kamogawa wanted Ippo to tag along with Takamura's training, which infuriated Takamura because he had to train alongside with a big loser. But this time, the tone shifted to a serious one. Takamura had a deep talk with Ippo, mentioning that Kamogawa was hurt by Ippo's loss and that Ippo just took that L without making excuses. Takamura then said that Ippo is simply not cut out for the world stage and drew a line in the dirt, saying that beyond that line is where real monsters reside. If Ippo wanted to remain human, he shouldn't cross it. Later, Ippo attempted his new horizontal uppercut Dempsey roll combo and nearly tore up his leg muscles. He decided to max out his leg training before attempting it again. Back at the gym, Ippo was sparring with another boxer. He wanted to unleash the newest version of the Dempsey roll again, but this time the Dempsey looked and felt entirely different. Ippo now leaned lower to hit uppercuts after horizontally moving in and was dominating until he lost his footing and hit the empty space. Everyone at the Kamogawa gym was shocked by this, but Kamogawa was anticipating Ippo to level up the Dempsey roll ever since Ippo's fight with Jimmy Sisfa, where Ippo used the Dempsey uppercut combo to finish off Jimmy. Ever since then, Kamogawa had planted the seeds for Ippo to evolve, and now Ippo was almost there to perfect the Dempsey roll without any setbacks. Yagi went on and said that this would be the key for Ippo to make an impactful comeback to boxing. Takamura, however, seemed cold and said that who gives a shiz about Ippo. Putting stocks on him will only lead to failure and more disappointment, so they should only focus on Takamura and Takamura alone, since he is the sole boxer that actually accomplishes something in the gym. If you're wondering why Takamura gives off this cold answer, it is because he believes that Ippo is not made to box on the world stage. He may have the skills and discipline of a high-ranked boxer, but Ippo lacks the hunger, mindset and will to become a world champion, since the world stage is where real monsters reside and lose part of their humanity. Kamogawa approached Ippo and said to him that he can evolve the Dempsey roll even further. Instead of weaving horizontally or throwing punches vertically, Ippo should weave in and throw punches diagonally. By this, Ippo eliminates the cost of finding his footing for an uppercut where he just shifts his weight and then throws punches vertically or gets into the position for a gazelle punch. To learn this diagonal Dempsey roll, Ippo had to train even further on his lower body, his physical strength and his balance. To do so, Kamogawa helped Ippo in his training, and Ippo even wore the weighted wristbands Sando used in his preparation for his fight against Ippo. Ippo wore these bands 24/7 to constantly train. Slowly but surely, Ippo got the feel for the Dempsey, and with Kamogawa's help, Ippo would have a deadly finisher to take down his opponents. Ippo met up with Takamura and they had a talk where Takamura asked Ippo if he could actually deliver in his comeback fight and if he is willing to carry the weight of moving forward. Ippo gave a very Ippo-like answer that Takamura expected, and they both moved on. Ippo wanted to try the newest Dempsey roll on a world-ranked bantamweight who had a world title fight coming up, but unexpectedly, Ippo went down after receiving just a few jabs. Kamogawa immediately cut off the spar and ordered Ippo to leave for the day. On his way to his office, Takamura wanted to ensure Kamogawa understood what just happened to Ippo. Despite this, Takamura bluntly stated that Ippo might be broken, meaning punch drunk, or in normal terms, have brain damage. That day, Ippo reflected on his growth and how he wanted to show everyone the new Dempsey roll, but he also realized something was wrong with his body, even though he didn't want to accept it. Ippo was then invited back to the gym, where his only task was to draw a straight line. Ippo, too nervous, couldn't do it. Kamogawa then ordered Ippo to leave the gym for an entire month and not train. Though Ippo didn't come to the gym, he secretly continued to train to avoid losing any momentum on his growth. 1 month has passed and Ippo returned to the gym better than ever. He underwent several tests to determine if he was healthy enough to compete again. First, Ippo had to draw a straight line, then walk along without faltering, and finally he had to mid-train with Kamogawa. Ippo passed all tests and was officially accepted back to the gym. Just in time, another one of Takamura's title defenses was scheduled, with Ippo set to fight on the same event. Takamura, frustrated about having to defend his title again despite wanting to move up to the next weight division, was confronted by Ippo, who asked if he ever felt lonely dedicating his entire life to boxing. Takamura responded with insight into the life of a world champion, explaining saying that everyone starts at the bottom as a nobody and must climb their way up by eliminating the competition to stand alone at the top. He added that this isn't a pathetic form of loneliness but an extraordinary feat, striving higher than the rest and continuing to move up. Ippo's comeback fight was set. At first, no mid-ranked world boxer wanted to face him, except for the new Philippine featherweight champion who had recently defeated Malcolm Ghetto. Antonio Guevara, a southpaw, presented a style that Ippo wasn't prepared to fight against. Still, Ippo promised to give his best. Miyata, Moshiba and Sando attended Ippo's comeback fight, eager to witness the rumored new Dempsey role and see if Guevara would be his first victim. As soon as the match began, Ippo, determined to showcase his evolution, wasted no time and charged in. Caught off guard, Guevara was hit with a devastating punch that set him into the ropes before he fell face first to the mat within the opening seconds. Not letting up, Ippo charged at Guevara again, positioning himself to unleash the diagonal Dempsey rope. He threw a left uppercut followed by a left hook from the unconventional angles, then transitioned into a right uppercut and a right hook. However, Guevara slipped and fell to the mat again, which the referee ruled as a slip. Not letting go of his momentum, Ippo bulldozed forward, but Guevara clung to him in a desperate attempt to stall time by throwing both of them to the mat. However, Ippo's brick house-like build made it impossible to botch him. Taking advantage of the situation, Ippo delivered a brutal short-range liver blows to Guevara. At the end of the round, Ippo had an inner monologue expressing his gratitude to coach Kamugawa and evolving to showcase the full potential of the diagonal Dempsey roll in this fight. In the following round, Guevara started adapting to Ippo's rhythm and landed some solid jabs. Still, when Ippo got too close, Guevara shoved him away out of fear. Frustrated, Ippo regrouped and pressed forward, initiating the Dempsey momentum. He threw punches that Guevara managed to block before missing several strikes due to Guevara's southpaw stance, which disrupted Ippo's approach. Guevara capitalized by jabbing Ippo away. Refusing to lose his chance, Ippo mixed in jabs and feints to break through Guevara's defense. Gathering the full strength, he aimed to finish Guevara. Ippo prepared to follow up with a diagonal Dempsey roll, but then realized that Guevara was already down to the mat. In the next round, Ippo promised himself he would deliver a knockout to Guevara and finish the fight. However, Guevara managed to land decent combos and during an exchange, Ippo accidentally crossed legs with Guevara and slipped. Trying to close in again, Ippo slipped a second time and this time it was ruled as a down. Doubt started creeping into Ippo's mind and he questioned what was happening to his body. Desperation took over as he threw punches that failed to connect and was caught by a sharp counter. The round ended with Kamugawa scolding Ippo for his terrible performance. Determined to push forward, Ippo went back into the fight. He realized that Guevara was aiming for counters, but when he tried to dodge it, he failed and went crashing headfirst into the mat and went unconscious. It became alarmingly clear that something was wrong. Ippo was making basic mistakes and could have easily won the fight if he had been in his usual form. Kamugawa then began to piecing it together. Flashes of Ippo's struggles after the Gonzalez fight, memories of Nekota's punch-drunk condition, and Wally's trainer warning about heading for disaster. The final realization came when Ippo attempted the Dempsey roll again but suddenly lost all his power and collapsed. At the moment, Kamugawa understood that Ippo's body had broken down. Despite this, Ippo got back up and continued. Summoning his remaining strength, Ippo landed a devastating one-shot counter on Guevara, sending him to the mat unconscious. With the fight nearing its climax, both men were on their last legs. Ippo unleashed the brutal combos on Guevara, managing to knock him down again. Now it was all or nothing. If either fighter went down this round, the match would be decided. Before going for the finishing blow, Ippo glanced at Kamugawa one last time. In his inner monologue, he apologized. He had known something was wrong with his body ever since his Gonzalez fight. Still, he gave everything he had to master the diagonal Dempsey roll for this final bout to show his gratitude to Kamugawa. Together, they had created this killer move, and Ippo wanted to end his career by showcasing it. Guevara, refusing to lose, prepared for a counter. Unfortunately for Ippo, Guevara was faster and landed the decisive blow first. Dramatically, Ippo fell to the mat and the fight was over. This marked the end of Ippo's boxing career as he officially retired from the sport. Takamura watched every second of the fight and made sure to remind himself that he shouldn't get attached to Ippo and should only focus on himself. His title defense was coming up and he ended the fight with just a single punch. Then this effing guy just had to trash talk Ippo about retiring and got nuclear heat from the crowd for it. Then he just kicked Aoki on the street to stop a taxi, then he just dipped. Kamugawa decided to bring Ippo home after his last fight and they had an emotional final talk. Kamugawa congratulated Ippo on his final fight and asked about his favorite matches. Ippo answered that his fights with Tate, Gonzalez and Guevara were his favorites, obviously matches that he lost. He also revealed that his favorite boxer is Takamura, among other things. You can stop and read for yourself to see who Ippo thinks are the strongest boxers, along with everything else he mentions. Kamogawa's final question was whether Ippo thought he made the right decision by starting boxing. Without hesitation, Ippo responded, "Of course I did." The coach left, and before Ippo could go to bed, he let out his final frustration by punching the ground and formally announced to his mother that he was finally home. The next day, Kumi came to Ippo's room to console him about his loss, but seeing him in that damaged state got her all emotional, and she ended up sleeping next to him. Ippo later went for a full body test to check if there was anything wrong with his brain. What he learned was that he was one step away from suffering real damage. He had accumulated enough damage to affect his balance and sense of range, but over time he could heal. Because CT is not a well-researched topic and symptoms could arise years later, Ippo ultimately decided to retire while he was still healthy. They also mentioned Dr. Kiniski. If you've read Ashita no Joe, you will know he's the same doctor who researched CTE in that series, meaning that yes, Ashita no Joe and Hajime no Ippo take place in the same universe. Ippo took his final farewell at the gym. Kamogawa deep down was grateful to Ippo. He was his last boxer and allowed him to dream just a little longer about capturing a world title with his teachings. Ippo said goodbye to the other boxers and told Takamura that he had gathered many treasures along the way. Then we got an extended montage of basically Ippo's entire career represented through the falling leaves. With that, Ippo turned his back and moved forward. And that basically marks the end of Hajime no Ippo, but not really. If you've enjoyed this video, then please leave a like and follow me on Instagram for my Ippo fan art. I'm the Reading Crow and thanks for watching.